Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast. BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, today we're still discussing the 2015 death of Henry McCabe from Minnesota. He was a Liberian American man that disappeared around Labor Day weekend which is, I guess September of 2015, and 2 months later, that's right, 2 months, his body was found in a nearby lake. And, well, by nearby, we really have to say he was actually found 4 miles where he was last seen. He was dropped off at a gas station by his friends after a night of drinking at a club, and then, that was the last time anybody saw Henry McCabe. This is the second installment that I've done on the death of Henry McCabe, and in the first one I mentioned that this was one that was kind of so perplexing to me. It was just kind of so bizarre because of all the inconsistencies. Not inconsistency, maybe we should say discrepancies, abnormalities. There's a lot of things that are kind of unaccounted for. The first thing was that his friend took his wallet to cut him off from drinking, and that's something that is very rare. Remember, in the first one, I said that I would ask people just kind of casually, have you ever heard of this? That somebody's, cut somebody off from drinking by taking their wallet? And at first, I thought that was the craziest thing in the world, but as I mentioned, I thought about it a little more, and I recognized that I have done that kind of voluntarily. Like, I've asked somebody to take my credit card once so I didn't spend, too much money. Um, that's somewhat of it's not the craziest thing in the world. They took his wallet not because he was too drunk to drive, but because he wanted to spend less money because he was facing some financial trouble. But the thing is, though, we also had his friend William Kennedy dropping him off at a America's gas station, but really, that turned out to be false. He was actually dropped off at a Holiday gas station 2 miles away. Wrong store, wrong name, wrong part of town. And then that was the last time anyone ever saw Henry McCabe alive. So we've seen, and we talked about a couple theories on the first part of the upload. So as you see, I'm kind of bypassing the background information a lot, but just to giving the very, very big nutshell version, the first theory we talked about was that Henry McCabe was tased by the police, and then they moved his body to the lake where he was found and they dumped him in the water. The second thing we've talked about was the possibility that he suffered some sort of stroke or aneurysm or kind of maybe heart attack. If I recall correctly, that they could not determine the cause of death because he had been in the water for so long that they just weren't able to determine any cause of death, but they knew that there were no signs of a struggle, no marks from an animal attack or something like that, and also there were no gunshot wounds. I mean, no stab wounds. I mean, so we can rule those things out. But once again, if it had been something like a taser, I don't think there any physical evidence of that would have survived being in the water for 2 months. And his body was actually found by a kayaker on that lake. And well, about this stuff though, there's also a simpler explanation out there. And the first comment that came in on my initial upload about Henry McCabe, which I believe was from Brian, so thank you so much. They were saying that the kind of simplest thing that people are going at is just that this was an accident. That Henry McCabe ended up, in the water by an accident, and he recommended something to me. He said that Lorden Arts, run by John Lorden, did an update on Henry McCabe, and they sort of said that they had the entirety of the strange voicemail that was saved by his wife, and it's like, after listening to the voicemail in its entirety, you can recognize that Henry was disoriented. He was intoxicated. He was leaving, a club after a heavy night of drinking with his friends. And also, he had a lot of mental things going on. I mean, he was dealing with stress, financial issues. He was in, like, kind of a very disoriented and kind of unhappy state of mind. And that led to kind of just apparently what Brian was saying in the comment was, if you were able to hear the voicemail in its entirety, it would reveal that it doesn't really sound so suspicious. They believe that the news media cut it up into small segments so that it would be kind of more, well, to draw in more viewers and to get people talking about it. Sensationalism. Is that actually what happened, though? Well, I'm not sure because the voicemail isn't released to the public, but John Lorden apparently had heard the whole thing, even though he couldn't release it to the public. I mean, Brian recommended that I watch the Lord Narts update, and I put it into YouTube, and it didn't come up, but I've seen the entire segment that he did on Henry McCabe. I think it's probably the single best presentation on the death of Henry McCabe, and I mean, it was just like, there's just so many things that still don't add up, though. Like, why did his friend get the location of the gas station so wrong where he let him off? How did he get 4 miles away from where he was last seen, like from the genuine drop-off point? How did he get 4 miles away in 30 minutes? From the time of the voicemail to the time of to the time that he had been dropped off. Like, there's only 30 minutes in between those two things, and he traveled 4 miles. How did that happen? Well, I mean, I'll say one thing about that in a minute. To explain the sort of issue with the friend William Kennedy, I thought that perhaps his friends might have been kind of disingenuous about where they left him, because maybe one of them had taken some money from the wallet and they didn't want to find out, because he gave them his wallet and said, "I don't want to spend anything." I thought maybe one of the friends had done something like that, or perhaps that they were just very, very intoxicated, and because they're out drinking at a club. I mean, they probably just did. Maybe the guy was telling the truth. Maybe he's just telling the truth. Maybe he was driving drunk after a heavy night of drinking at a nightclub, and maybe he genuinely thought he left Henry at at the Holiday store, or the America store was. He pointed out the America's gas station. Maybe he genuinely thought that happened because he was just really drunk and driving when he shouldn't have. I mean, I still think that that's an enormous mistake. I mean, if you're living in a place, if we understand that William Kennedy was, a resident of this area, he wasn't some visitor. If he were a tourist, I wouldn't think anything of it, but if he did indeed live there, 2 miles away, and you got the wrong name, wrong location, wrong everything, that does still sound kind of suspicious. I was reading an article before, like recording this a couple hours ago, and it was, I want to say the guy's name was Rowan. It was something like Rowan's blog, something very, very ordinary like that, and he was just sort of saying, even when you listen to the voice message from Henry McCabe, it's like, he says, it sounds like a man who fell into cold water. That's what he says it sounds like. It sounds like a guy who's just fallen. And one of the newscasters was even talking about this. They said in the first parts of the voicemail, you can hear walking, then you can hear somebody fall. And what I think the guy's name was Rowan. He sort of said that it sounds like a person has just fallen into cold water. And it's like, maybe that's just what happened. But if that's the case, how did Henry get to that point? Well, let's talk about a theory. I believe, though, that, once again, William Kennedy's driving the car, Henry McCabe is the passenger. William Kennedy's probably intoxicated, and he might just have no idea what's going on. He might have thought that he left Henry at the Holiday store or the America store. He really has no idea. He was driving drunk. He lets Henry out, and then Henry just starts walking. I forget the exact reason why they left him at the gas station. It might have been because there might have been something there that he wanted to buy water or buy some cigarettes or something like that, but I really forget. It's been that particular detail. But anyway, Henry's out of the car. He's walking. Well, the theory that I sort of composed was he ran into somebody else. He started talking to somebody else. That person gave him a ride. Because, I mean, to go 4 miles in 30 minutes, I don't think he was running. I don't think that, no. And I think he got into somebody's car. That person gave him a ride, let him out of the car, and then he began walking alongside the lake. And, it might really just be that in his own disoriented state of mind, alcohol-induced, a lot of things on his mind, financial trouble. I mean, he's not focusing on anything at all, and that caused him to fall into the lake, and then he just wasn't able to regain his composure. And I say that it led to something like that because I just don't see the physical evidence to support that this was a murder. I mean, the only real thing is just this very, very bizarre voicemail of growls and moans. And David Paulides was trying to turn this into a Bigfoot theory. And the only thing that I liked about it was he wrote it out as this is not a Bigfoot case, this is a big feet case. There were at least more than one, Bigfoot in the area, two big feet. But when we have two Sasquatches going on at the same time, I'd never really heard that before. And I used to be a very big fan of Finding Bigfoot. But I digress from that because, okay, I mean, it sounds like, if Bigfoot did exist, that's kind of the sounds you would expect. But, yeah, there's really very little physical evidence to support that, he was mauled by two big feet or something, so I would dismiss those types of theories from the Henry McCabe case. And I'm really kind of, I don't know why this was so perplexing to me years ago. I really thought that it was something much larger. I mean, I was really entertaining the possibility that he had been tased and then thrown into the water. And if that turned out to be the case, I wouldn't be surprised. But also, from the beginning, people were talking about what if he had a heart attack? What if he had some type of stroke? Although he was only 32 years old. I mean, heart attack and stroke are possible, but not super likely. Or, it's just, it could just be the case of somebody hitched a ride with someone for a little while, like just even taking him a couple miles down the road. He got out of the car, walking somewhat close to the lake, and in his own intoxicated state, fell into the water, fell into the cold water. And maybe that guy Rowan had a point. Rob Dyke has also covered this case, and I saw his name in the search results on YouTube, but I haven't watched that one yet. I'm not really sure if I would. Like, in 2014, I was kind of a fan of Rob Dyke. I really thought that it was kind of nice how someone could do the things like the countdowns and the mysteries, but really incorporate their personality into it. But after a little bit of time, I kind of veered away from things from Rob Dyke because I felt that, he just doesn't talk in the most natural voice, and I found that, when people are just kind of doing the sort of true crime stuff in kind of a much more natural and, what is it, just sort of like straight monologue approach, I really found that that was something that I kind of preferred listening to. And, Rob Dyke throws in some special effects and some things like that I'm not really that much a fan of anymore. But at the same time, I might check it out later and see if there's something new that I could learn about the case. But I've maybe that comment that we received from Brian is somewhat spot on, that the media kind of took the story and they tried to spin it into something much larger, when in reality this is just a tragedy, another case of somebody being intoxicated near a body of water. I mean, if I could send like one message to, anybody anybody who's ever going to go out drinking, it would be like, do not walk by a body of water by yourself or something like that. Well, this is how so many of these things happen. I mean, even the case of Elisa Lamb, somebody who was found dead not in a river but a water tank. And, it's just like when someone is disoriented around a body of water, then this can often lead to death. That's the smiley face killer's theory, the Manchester Canals butcher theory. Now we have Henry McCabe, and and yes, Elisa Lamb. Granted, she wasn't even drunk at the time. She was disoriented, most likely from something to do with bipolar disorder. But once again, that's all theoretical. I'm not saying like I'm a mind reader or something and I have the definitive answers on that. But is that just what this is with the case of Henry McCabe? Is this the case of a guy who was out at a nightclub? I mean, his friends dropped him off, which I do have to kind of still insist that is somewhat of it's not the most normal thing when someone's very intoxicated. Most people are pretty big on driving somebody at home, but an explanation for that could be that the driver of the car, William Kennedy, was also drunk, and he just wasn't really aware of what was going on, or he was just, too intoxicated to process it. I'm not really 100% sure, but just I sort of just made that one comment, that one sort of theory that maybe William or Calvin Johnson, the other person, had taken money from Henry's wallet because, well, it just would kind of explain why they were sort of so wrong about the location where they dropped him off at. I would say it's either one of two things. Either there was something that they wanted to hide, or they were just both intoxicated and didn't remember. They were just so out of it as well. But right now, I guess the theory that I'm kind of going with is They leave the nightclub. William Kennedy lets out Henry McCabe at a Holiday gas station. Henry McCabe maybe buys an item, or maybe he just walks away. He runs into somebody else that he knows. He gets into that person's car, and they drive approximately 3 to 4 miles. Henry McCabe gets out, and he's just walking along. He's not focused on anything because not only is he drunk, he's also has a lot of kind of personal things going on that are really, really just kind of nagging at him, and he's not paying attention. And then he falls into the water, and all of this is being recorded because he pocket dialed his wife. So that's how we have this voicemail. And he fell into the water and wasn't able to regain composure. Maybe there is a simple explanation to this all. But what do you guys think about all this? Do you have anything to say about this upload? And do you have anything to say about the death of Henry McCabe? Or anything we've put forward? Until next time.